What was your "I told you so" moment? In high school, I was at a party where everyone was getting drunk. I'd come with two friends, and near the end of the night, this one guy was there loading everyone into his van to get late-night food. He swore that he was not drunk, and there were so many people in his car, including the two people I came with, it was not a battle I was going to win. But it seemed like an obviously dumb situation. A bunch of underage kids packed into a van, driving around in the suburbs at 1 in the morning. I told my friends that this wasn't a good idea, and they needed to get out of the van and come back home with me. My house was within walking distance. They acted like I was a party pooper for a sec, but then got out. The next day, I find out the guy driving ran a red light and got T-boned by a truck. The one kid in the back almost died, and everyone got banged up. The friends I pulled out of the van were in the back seats along with them. Not saying I saved their lives, but I really may have saved their lives. You know, I'll never really understand people who make horrible decisions just because of peer pressure. Peer pressure has never really affected me that much. My newborn baby was projectile vomiting after every feeding. I took her to the doctor several times, always ended up being sent away with some suggestions to try a different formula. I tried like 4 different ones and no change. The 4th or 5th visit, they sent me away again with the same recommendation, even though I pleaded with them to figure out what was wrong with my baby. I left the office and drove to the ER instead. She ended up having an emergency surgery that day. The surgeon said she would have starved to death, or maybe dehydrated, had she gone much longer without the surgery. I gave the doctor in that office a piece of my mind. Yeah, that's always great when you go to the doctor, like dying, and they're just like, you're probably fine, just walk it off. My sister and I were out sledding when we were kids at this place with a really steep hill. I had unknowingly gone down a sled path that had a jump in it, and when I landed, it really hurt my back. So when I got back up to the top of the hill, I told my sister, "Don't go that way, the jump really hurts." She called me a baby and didn't believe me that it hurt, so she decided she would go down that path on her sled. Well, she hit the jump and didn't get back up. Turns out she fell so hard she had broken her leg. When we finally got her back up the hill into the car, I got to tell her, "I told you so." Hey, I mean, it's just part of the kid's spirit. Anytime you tell them not to do something, they have to at least try it for themselves to understand why you say that. I work at a US Navy shipyard. My worst "I told you so" moment was when a submarine had multiple issues with sanitation and collection tanks and the piping that led from the showers and the toilets to the sanitation and collection tanks. Documented and pointed out the same problems over a 12-week period. Supervisors and the tank area manager didn't give a crap and pointedly ignored my reports. Undocking day was approaching, and the captain of the sub wanted the boat out on time, so they moved up the tank closure schedule. So, tank closing protocol requires several sign-offs, one from a qualified civilian inspector, one from a qualified naval hull technician sailor, and one from a qualified Navy engineering officer. The tank in question failed all 3 concurrent inspections. Undocking got pushed back by 30 days until all problems found were corrected. Daily operations estimated costs were north of $10,000 per day. Factor in the mandatory overtime and rework required, and we were looking at maybe triple the daily cost. This is just people's pay. I didn't get to see the material cost overrun, but I know for a fact that a lot of the materials got shipped in or fabricated in-house overnight. Needless to say, a lot of people on General Schedule's pay got chewed out by the then shipyard CO in private. It kind of makes me think, would you rather have something go wrong with your vehicle when you're in a plane or when you're in a submarine? I feel like submarines need to be in pretty good shape for you to want to ride one. Since I was 14, my throat got itchy when I ate apples. I told my mom, but she thought I just didn't want to eat apples and forced me to eat them. I went to the doctor's office and got tests for allergies. Turns out I'm allergic to apples, peaches, and many other fruits. Well, it may not be allergies, but I certainly understand the throat pain. I'm sure you could tell that I've been sick this past week. My partner and I were broke and struggling to make ends meet, but we always kept money in the budget for fun or takeout nights. One night we decided to get fish and chips. My partner had never ordered from that particular place before, but it was my favorite, so he knew it'd be good. We don't have a lot of money to spare, so I know we had to order smart. We'll only order what we need. We start driving, and I'm about to call, and my partner tells me he wants to order $10 worth of chips. For those who don't know how much that is, a scoop of chips is usually about $2 to $3. I tried to tell him that it was a ridiculous order, and that this particular fish and chip shop was very generous with their portions, which is why it was one of my favorites. He was adamant about the $10 chips, and that he was so hungry that it's not like it would be wasted. We had a mini argument in the car, and I finally gave up and said, "Fine, order your chips, but you better eat them all." We get to the fish and chip shop, and we go to the counter to pay, and the old fellow who runs the shop comes over to serve us. We tell him what we order and here to collect. "That order is yours?" he goes. I start to shake my head and smile. "Yes." My partner replies, "And it's just for 2 of you?" The old man asks, looking concerned. "Ah, yes." At that point I start laughing. I tried to tell him. We both laugh, and my partner realizes his mistake when the old guy pulls out 2 huge parcels of chips. One of those alone would have fed a full family. We all laugh our little hearts out, thank the man, and went home to eat our fish and chips. And no, he didn't eat them all. We didn't even get through the first parcel. Now whenever we need the other person to trust our judgment on something, we say, $10 chips? And the other person will always relent. It still cracks me up every time I think about his face when the old man gave us our order. Well, I just want to know where you can go to eat where you could feed a whole family for $5. I feel like there aren't very many places like that anymore. Lawyer here. I fired a partner who I found some real irregularities in their spending habits versus what they were making after he could provide a good answer to where it came from. Other partner left and started a new firm with them because they disagreed with my decision and refused to look at the evidence. Turns out he stole $500K of clients' money, got disbarred, and is now facing prison time. I told her to look at the evidence and she didn't listen. You know, a lot of these stories kind of remind me of like every horror show for children. Like, try to guess which show I'm talking about, where a little kid sees something scary and he tries to tell his parents, but his parents don't believe him, and he's freaking out because nobody's believing what he's talking about. And then at the end, they see that scary thing he was talking about, and then it's like, I told you guys. I mean, if you ever watch that old Goosebumps show, it's basically every single episode. I guess kids' biggest fear is just to not be believed by adults. I once owned a dog who was very stubborn and independent. She lived a feral life in the mountains as a young pup, and I feel like that played a role. She felt more like a roommate than a pet. She was having heart trouble when she got older, and she had to get a chest scan at the vet. These 2 men came out to get her, so I gave them a heads up that she would absolutely dislike being flipped on her back and held for the scan, as flipping a dog on its back is putting it in a pretty submissive position. One of the guys interrupted me and basically said they were professionals, and I had to just let them work. They snapped a muzzle on her and took her to the back. A few seconds pass, then I hear a crash and a few yells. One of the guys who took her comes out and sheepishly asked for my help. It turns out as soon as they flipped her on her back, she kicked out of their arms, unclipped her muzzle, removed it with her front paws, then made a mad dash for freedom. I caught her roaming around the back of the vet's office, and she was perfectly well behaved while I held her for the scan. I felt bad for the 2 guys she escaped from, but I tried to warn them. Ah, man, speaking of pets, you know, I always talk about troubles I go through with my cat. Sometimes people are like, oh, you need to take her to the vet. Just put her in her carrier and you can just take her there. But I'm like, Faye does not go in carriers. Some of you might remember that story I told when I moved, where I couldn't get her into the carrier, so I just picked her up and hopped in the car, and she just sat on my lap while I was driving. And then she peed on me while I was driving. And now we just get to look at her butt while she's just staring at the curtain. This dumb woman wouldn't leave the llamas at our petting zoo alone, even after I warned her. Eventually they had enough and spit all over her. Green, goopy spit from head to torso. She threw up a bunch and I laughed, until I smelled it, and then I was retching too. And llamas are kinda weird. They're basically just mini giraffes. A bed frame wasn't properly lashed down while moving. Partner insisted the weight of the frame would keep it in place. Flew into the middle of a major intersection on a left turn. We dodged 4 lanes of oncoming traffic to collect the pieces. I fixed my partner with a look that could peel paint, and he said, I know, you told me so, and you're right, I'm sorry. I still give him crap for it every time we're moving something. It's funny now, but man, I was pissed at the time. Man, this is always like my biggest fear every time I've moved. Because it's not only just, okay, you've lost your piece of furniture that now you're gonna have to pay to replace. It's also that you might have caused some massive destruction or accidents in the middle of the road, and it's also that you've got to, like they said, try and go pick it up. There's just so many horrible things involved with that. My best friend started dating my ex-wife. It was 10 years after the divorce, and he checked if I'd take issue, even though he didn't need to. Anyway, when we were divorced, it was because she was cheating on me while I was in Afghanistan. He goes out of state for work, and told me that she started acting off. Not answering calls, quick to hang up, starting fights when he's home, or going to parties rather than spending time with him. I pointed out that this is what she did to me almost exactly, and stated that if he confronts her on her stuff, she will probably, without provocation, accuse him of cheating, and more to the point, most likely because she is actively cheating. Cue 30-minute monologues of how she's grown up, and she's not that person now. She's just used to not having to answer to others or having a real relationship in a year. 3 hours later he calls because he went to pick up some weed, and there she was, blowing the cellar. See, some people tell me, why don't you just get a date? You're being too picky. And I just have to point them to stuff like this, where it's like, there are a lot of people that being with them is worse than being alone. I had a weirdly dark freckle, the color of chocolate. I showed my spouse, and he called me a hypochondriac, and if I go to the doctor, I'd be wasting their time. I went to the dermatologist. It was melanoma. Yeah, I don't really care how many I told you so things people say to me. I pretty much just don't go to the doctor for anything. Helping a former friend do some renovations in a house he had just purchased, I had better than half a clue of what I was doing, and my other friend who was there with us definitely knew what she was doing, but the guy who owned the house hardly knew which end of the hammer to grip. We got down to the foundation walls, and there's an almost brand new 4x4 post running from the floor to the ceiling, and he thought it was ugly. I tried to explain to him that it was clearly a load bearing, and my friend chimed in that it was obviously there for a reason, but his reply was something to the effect of girls being hysterical and mocking us for thinking the ceiling was going to fall down. I literally backed away from the situation, and when he took a maul to the beam and knocked it loose, I watched the ceiling drop. He still thought I was overreacting until we got upstairs and saw the 3-inch gap between the floor and baseboards along the front wall of the house. See, this one's more entertaining because I, or more specifically my dad, does this kind of thing for a living. I've talked about this cheating scandal at my high school before. Something I never mentioned was my friend was about to ask for the answers to a test that he really needed. I told him not to do it, it wasn't worth it all. Thankfully he didn't do it. When the whole scandal came out, 3 kids got expelled, 8 suspended. I know a dozen more were caught, and I don't know what happened to them. My friend's teacher ended up giving him and a few other kids an A just for being honest. Apparently he was one of the few kids in the class that didn't cheat. Man, if I was a teacher, I'd be trying this stuff all the time, just giving out like fake answer sheets, and then anyone who answers with that fake answer sheet, like you would basically know that they cheated and then you just catch them red-handed. My brother had a really bad habit of putting his wallet in the back pocket of his pants and going to work and busy places all around the city. You could practically see it sticking out of his pocket. I warned him many times over the years that he's inviting himself to be robbed, that a skilled thief is going to swipe it off easily without him having any clue. He ignored me, saying he was too mindful to let that happen. One day he came home looking ghastly. Turns out he indeed got robbed. Lost all his debit cards, government-issued ID cards, and a ton of other important stuff besides money. I literally said, "I told you so." Yeah, see, that's one of the scarier parts of being an adult. When I was a kid, I lost my wallet, and oh well, I'm down $10, that sucks. But if I lose my wallet today, I've got to call my bank, I've got to go to the driver's license division, I've got to go get some membership cards back, and it's just going to be a huge mess. My dad had a habit of driving down the middle lane for a whole mile when he was commuting back from his weekly shopping trip. I always warned him that he can't be in that lane for that long, but he always wrote it off, saying it's fine. Finally, after doing this for 2 years, he was pulled over by the police and ticketed. He was upset that day, but all I could do was say, "I told you so." Man, I can't believe he went 2 years with that. I mean, it's actually kind of weird just how conditioned most people are when getting into that middle lane. I mean, there's nothing physically stopping you from, like, using the middle lane to get up to speed or something, but so many people just, like, sit in the middle of the road and then just wait for the biggest opening they possibly can. I told my father to invest in Bitcoin back in 2013. Here we are 8 years later. Yeah, I think a lot of us got that prompt back then, but you never really know what's going to be the right investment at the time. The way I like to put it is that, okay, there is something that you can buy today that is going to multiply your money by 10 million in a few years. Now, what is that thing? Well, you don't know. And trust me, back in 2010 to 2013, you didn't know then either. I had a friend who was super stubborn and hated people telling him what to do. Now, I don't know how we stayed friends for so long, because I'm the type where if I have concerns about something, I'll point it out. Major incompatibility going on there. One day, he told us that he wanted bright blue hair, and he was going to get it done some weekend. One of my special interests was hair. Before then, I researched all about bleaching and dyeing before, so I wasn't an expert, but I knew some stuff. So I told him what he told us. Make sure you do your bleaching in increments so your hair doesn't get damaged, since some stylists like to bleach in one go and could really mess up your hair. Y'all, he looked at me with the most tired, messed up look I've ever seen from him, and was like, "Man, I'm sure she knows what she's doing. She's the expert, not you." Ouch. Snark noted. I mean, he was right. I wasn't an expert, and I was giving annoying, unsolicited advice. But I kept all my thoughts on the hair to myself from then on. The weekend comes and goes. He got his hair done. On Facebook, he shows where he went from black and brown hair to platinum blonde to bright blue in like a day. The color actually came out nice, but his hair was obviously damaged. I kept my mouth shut. He even came to me to personally show it off in his own version of "I told you so," modeling and stuff. I congratulated him, even going as far to say, "Huh, guess I was wrong." A week or so later, after his hair had gotten noticeably shorter, I guess breakage, he came to school with a buzz cut. I didn't say a word or ask anything, but another guy asked him what happened to his hair. He answered casually, "It was damaged, so I decided to chop it all off." I still didn't say anything because I didn't want to be an a-hole. But oh boy, did that inner party "I told you so" feel good. You know, believe it or not, back in 2011, I actually bleached my hair and dyed it blue one time, or 2 times. But I mean, when your hair is short, once it starts growing in and you have 2 different color hair and it looks terrible, you just cut it all off. I don't dare dye my long hair anything because I don't want to have to cut it all off. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video of me being back after... I mean, it's weird. I only missed 1 video, but it feels like it's been forever since I uploaded. But I'm doing mostly better now. It was basically just a really bad cold. But anyways, I'll see you next time.